Hey guys, welcome back to my little series where I talk about television and my thoughts on a TV show or something about a TV show usually while I do my makeup, sometimes just by itself, or sometimes I make nails. Not the point. Anyway, I'm gonna do my makeup today, clearly. I know my hair looks bad right now. I don't want to talk about it. Today, as you can probably see by the title, I'm going to be talking about the summer I turned pretty, more specifically what team I'm on and why. I'm going to be giving you evidence. I might as well have made a PowerPoint, okay? I have my evidence stacked up. First of all, let me just start by saying there is no love triangle in this story. Not really, not a real one, okay? There really actually is not, there shouldn't be teams, because that's not actually what this even is. Now, if you're at all wondering what I mean by that, the overall story of the show is not about a love triangle. The story of The Summer I Turned Pretty is about Belly and Conrad's love story, and Jeremiah is just a plot device in the middle of that. Jeremiah is just a stepping stool on the way to that. He's just a part of the story. It's Belly and Conrad's love story. Oh, spoilers, by the way, for both the books and the show, but I will say I'm going to try and reference the show as little as possible in my reasoning, because I understand that they're different. It is the source material, so I might bring it up every now and again, but I'm going to try to reference it as little as possible. Also, I know I'm a grown woman talking about a love triangle between fictional characters on the internet. I'm aware. I get that. However, my defense is that I read the books when I was 12, the first book when I was 12, and so watching the show has reverted me back to 12-year-old me, and also it's fun, and also it's not, we're having fun. This is for fun. This is all opinions, based in fact, but this is all opinions, and like, you're allowed to have a difference of opinion. That's okay. You can think different than me. That's okay. We don't need to hate on each other. That's okay. These are fictional people. Let's keep that in mind before we get too deep into this. I've been rewatching the show, like, in between new episodes coming out, and I really forgot just, like, how physically painful season 2 is to watch, and season 2 is kind of when I started taking the bulk of my notes, because I was just getting so unbelievably frustrated. My big opening statement is going to be that for Jeremiah, it wasn't love, it was sudden attraction, amplified by his disdain and envy for his brother and his need, like, insatiable need to beat him at things and prove that he's better than him somehow. Do I think Jeremiah has love for Belly? Obviously, yeah. Platonically. Do I think he's in love with Belly? No. I don't think that Jeremiah could physically ever care for Belly as much or more than he envies Conrad. Giving him some grace, I'm not even 100% sure that he fully knows that that's what this is. Jeremiah, I mean. Like, deep down, I think probably, subconsciously, he for sure knows that, but I think a lot of it might even be subconscious, giving him some kind of grace. And also, while I highly dislike Jeremiah Fisher most of the time, I will say he maybe gets a little too much hate. Do I think he's a good person? No. No, I do not. However, one instance especially that I'm willing to give him some grace in is I see a lot of people on the internet talking about how that scene where they're arguing, Jeremiah and Conrad are arguing outside of that party that they throw at the cousin's house, and Jeremiah and Conrad are arguing about the fact that Conrad wasn't present while their mom was dying. He was off at college, and the argument is often, oh, Susanna wanted Conrad to do that, and that's true, and I'm not saying Conrad is in the wrong for doing that. I absolutely think that's what Susanna wanted, that's where he should have been, but that doesn't change the fact that does make Jeremiah's experience different, because he was watching her die every day, and he was there every single day watching her waste away, and that's traumatizing, and it was a different experience than Conrad had. Am I saying it was, like, better or worse? No, but I am saying that he was right. They do have a different experience in that one instance, and I think that must have been very hard for Jeremiah to deal with. Do I think he should blame Conrad for that? No. Of course not, but he blames Conrad for everything, ever, all the time. Even when the conversation is not even about him, he finds a way to bring it up and make it about his inferiority complex. in comparison to Conrad. I think Jeremiah, whether intentionally or not, is a very manipulative person in the fact that, especially with Billy, he finds ways to guilt trip her a lot, and he also brings up Conrad all the time to, like, throw that in Billy's face and, like, use that to manipulate her or change how she feels. When talking about Jeremiah being manipulative, I entirely forgot to mention when, first of all, he not only constantly brings up Conrad and throws it in Billy's face, but he's constantly, when he found out that they had kissed, he was like, he's gonna break your heart. He's gonna break your heart. And he's constantly like, he let you go, and stuff like that, and just trying to make Conrad look as bad as possible. But then, what I had forgotten was, he also tried to, he convinced Nicole to bring Conrad to that music festival and tried to convince Conrad to go so that he could get Billy alone. Weirdo. He sabotages so often. He resorts to manipulation and sabotage, which Conrad has never done. Along with also throwing his mom dying in her face, which Conrad never does. Even though that's the reason that Conrad was changing the way he was in a negative way and, like, acting negatively the way he was because his mom was dying, but he never uses that as an excuse. He never brings it up. He never is like, oh, well, my mom was dying. Even though, like, that's clearly what the reason was, he never uses it as a scapegoat and, like, says that that's why. Whereas Jeremiah is constantly throwing that in Billy's face, being like, oh, my mom has cancer, my mom's dying, so, meh. And that's just, like, such a stark difference between the two boys. Is like, Conrad, whether it takes him a little bit or not, is constantly taking accountability, even when he doesn't really need to. Like, he's constantly saying, oh, he fucked up, he did this, he did that. He's never blaming other people for his actions. Literally ever. Name one time that Conrad has blamed somebody else for what he did. In any instance. Never. You know what Jeremiah constantly does? Blame everyone but himself for his actions. Don't worry, I do have real examples of stuff too. I'm just, like, setting up my points before I pull out the receipts. Oh, I did mean to say this earlier. I think a common sentiment on the internet right now, or at least on TikTok, at least on my For You page, is that Billy shouldn't be with either of them. She should leave them alone. Conrad deserves better. It would be weird for Billy to go back to Conrad after dating Jeremiah for multiple years. And listen, okay? If this was real life, if these were real life people, I would agree with you 100%. I would be like, I think you're all a little weird, except for maybe Conrad, but I think you're all a little weird. I think the situation's weird. I think you should all stay away from each other. I think there are other people in the world and you should date them and leave each other the fuck alone. But, hear me out. Because this is fictional and I'm watching it for my own entertainment and it is a television show, I don't agree. If I'm watching a TV show that has multiple options for a love interest at all, I want to be rooting for a team, and I am going to be rooting for a team that is, like, one of the main options. It's the fun of the whole thing. And, like, to be honest, I don't even care if the relationship is a little toxic, a little fucked up. I think that makes it more interesting as long as it's not, like, don't get crazy on me. Obviously, if it's illegal or really bad, you know what I mean? But in instances like this, like, would I think it was bizarre and weird and off-putting if somebody was homie-hopping brothers in real life? Yeah, absolutely. But this is a television show. I'm entertained. I am picking a team, and I am going to root for it. So if we get to the end and she chooses Summer or some weird cop-out like that, I will be a little upset. Like, again, if these were real people, stay the fuck away from each other. But it's not real people. So I'm also going to talk a little bit about Jenny Han for a second. That's my girl, first and foremost. Oh god, I just squeezed way too much out of that. It's okay, I don't have to go anywhere today, so if my makeup looks a little crazy. Ugh. Okay, I'm just gonna put one dot on each side and then blend it out and then add more if I need to. Anyway, back to Jenny Han. She can don her unbiased mask as much as she wants to, but at the end of the day, it's clear in the things that she says, the things that she does, and in the writing itself that my girl is Team Conrad. It will blend out, I promise. But yeah, she is very clearly Team Conrad, and there's no way she's gonna give that ending to Jeremiah. There's no chance. I've seen a lot of people talking about how the ending of the show is supposedly going to be different. I don't think she's going to switch teams on us. I know things have already been different in the show, but the story, she's said in interviews that the story itself is important to her, and it's important to like preserve the overall story, and that she knows that it's important to the book fans and that she wouldn't want to take it away from the book fans. She's said stuff like that before, so there's like no chance. And like things being changed and altered for the show is because she wants to revitalize the story for so that book fans are still able to be surprised by new things and to revitalize it for new viewers. And I totally get that. Although I do also understand the criticisms, because that, like, from the book viewers, that you want the story that you loved to be seen in exact shot-to-shot detail when you watch it on the screen. But I also do understand the importance of switching it up. And, like, you create something so long ago, and it's existed for so long, and then you just sit there and you think about some of the things you might have done differently with it, and now she gets the chance to do that, and I get that. But there's no way she's gonna change the endgame couple. It's just not happening. She's the OG Conrad truther. Like, she's not. Okay, now, let's talk about the fact that Jeremiah has always been fully aware how Belly feels about Conrad. And thus I have an inability to feel bad for him in this situation. It's mentioned multiple times that everybody at the cousin's house knows that Belly has been in love with Conrad the entirety of her life, pretty much. But then even entirely separate from that, we hear Jeremiah acknowledge it multiple times. Especially considering he cannot keep his brother's name out of his mouth and will bring him up any chance he gets, especially in relation to Belly. For example, in season 2, when Conrad is missing for a little bit, Jeremiah and Belly go looking for him, and Jeremiah says he doesn't need Belly to come along, but that Conrad might need her because he still cares what she thinks. So not only is he fully aware at this point that Belly has always loved Conrad, he's also acknowledging audibly to Belly that not only did he know that Conrad loved her, he knows that he still does. In his voiceover, he says, "Sometimes I hate myself for how long it took me to notice that invisible force between them," and basically insinuates that they're inevitable. And like, yeah, so you're acknowledging this all out loud, well, in your voiceover, and yet you still go after her? You still date her? Odd choice, guy. Odd choice. Like, you're like setting yourself up for failure under the guise of the exact opposite. Like, you're trying to beat him so bad that you're setting yourself up for failure. Jeremiah, you're embarrassing yourself. Also, Conrad, your brother hates you, by the way. Now we're going to get into one of the most common brought up points, I think, and that's the fact, like, the difference in the way that Jeremiah and Conrad talk about how they knew they had feelings for Belly. Because I often see people try and convince me that Jeremiah always had feelings for Belly and he was always in love with her. And that's just not the case, and he tells us as such. And then tells Belly something completely different to her face, totally lying to her. Manipulating her in a time of vulnerability. It's fine. So in Jeremiah's recollection of when he knew that he had feelings for Belly, he says, "Ever since the moment I saw her last summer, it was over." And then he begins to describe lusting after her. And he also says she had always been just Belly, my friend. He says those words, "She had always been just Belly, my friend." You know, until she got pretty and then you started lusting after her and making it a competition with your brother like a weirdo freak. But then, when he's confessing his feelings to Belly, he tells her that he's always felt this way, and that the only reason he didn't act on it was because there was always Conrad, and then this summer Cam. And he just straight up lied to her face. Very cool. Very awesome. And then Conrad, on the other hand, not only do we hear, I'll go over what he says, but even in his actions, which I'll also go over, I'll go back to what he says because the actions are a totally separate tangent. I don't want to confuse myself too much. He describes realizing that he was in love with Billy, saying that it wasn't just one moment, and it's like when you're half awake but still kind of asleep, and you just slowly start to wake up until one moment you realize you're awake, and it was like that. Doesn't mention her appearance, doesn't... Wow. Big difference, very big contrast in those two things, and I really do think it shows the difference between the brothers and the difference in the way that they really do feel about Belly. He's describing being in love, he is describing lust and attraction, which is what brings me back to my original point in the beginning, which is Jeremiah just is experiencing platonic love mixed with sudden attraction, mixed with, or amplified by, his need to beat Conrad. In the beginning of the show, when we are first introduced to our dear Conrad, everybody is talking about how he's acting different this summer, and I don't see enough people acknowledging this, because a lot of Conrad haters like to be like, oh, well, he always treated Billy like this, like he's like such a moody, like emotionally unavailable person, blah, 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 blah. But everybody in the house, both the moms, everybody is constantly talking about how different Conrad's acting this summer, and how this is not how he usually acts, and I feel like nobody acknowledges that. This is not how Conrad normally acts. Throughout various flashbacks and even just like the moms talking about like old memories, we start to get like a general idea of how Conrad usually is outside of what we've seen. Because when we're introduced to him, unbeknownst to us, he knows that his mom is dying again, and he's the only one that knows, and he's holding it in and bottling it up. And he also knows that his dad cheated on his mom, which he's also the only one who knows. And so he's bottling these things up and internalizing them and trying not to burden other people with this information or like spill people's secrets. And so he's just like absurdly depressed, and that's why he's acting different. Is that totally an excuse to be an asshole? No. But you can understand why he's acting the way that he is. And also he, again, never uses it as an excuse. He takes full accountability for how he acted that summer, regularly. He regularly is like, I was an asshole, I treated you poorly, I shouldn't have done that. And he never once is like, oh, but my mom was dying, you know, like somebody else constantly does. But again, through flashbacks and the moms talking and just like reminiscing, we start to get kind of a feel for how Conrad usually acts, and especially towards Belly. For example, we hear Susanna say that Conrad was the one that always made sure Belly was included and forced the other boys to include Belly. And through multiple flashbacks, we see Conrad regularly being very sweet to Belly and just treating her very well. He's the only one of the three that treats her nicely ever, because the other two are constantly like bullying her, but not like in a sibling way, you know, like in a... Yeah, like in the scene where Steven and Jeremiah take her muffin and they're like throwing it around the room, and Conrad catches it and just hands it back to her. Or she's trying to learn a dance and she asks Steven to come help her with it. He says no. Conrad stops what he's doing to go help her, and he teaches her, and they're dancing around, and it's very cute. Because again, Conrad's always loved her. The only time we get a scene like this from Jeremiah is when she was sick, Belly was sick, and she had to stay home, and Jeremiah stays home with her, but he had no intention of doing so. He did that because his mom asked him to. I missed so many points I wanted to make because I had already been talking for so long, but Belly and Jeremiah have love for each other. It just is it feels very platonic to me. Every scene between them feels so platonic to me. Even when they're flirting, even when they're kissing, something about it just feels so platonic. And I can't shake it. Another thing that I think is important to note is that our dear sweet Isabel Conklin is an unreliable narrator. And that's made quite clear to us many times, especially when she says stuff like the fact that Conrad never notices her like that, he never acknowledges her, he doesn't see her that way. But then we get the contrast and we see scenes like the first night that they're at Cousins and she's in the pool and he blatantly flirts with her and she just like shakes it off. she doesn't realize, because in her head she's built it up so much that she has like a very specific image of what Conrad confessing his love to her should look like in her fantasy world. So when he is making these advances towards her and it's not her perfect idealized thing, it's not clicking for her. She's not understanding that that's what's happening. And also she's just so in denial that he could possibly like her back, because again, she's built up this fantasy so much that she just doesn't notice. She's just fully unaware that that's what's happening to her. And it's also made kind of clear when you take into account who in her life is on what team. For example, I'd say the CEO, other than Susanna, the CEO of Team Conrad is our dear sweet Steven. And the CEO of Team Jellyfish is Taylor. And now up until these points, okay, up until the point in the show we're at right now, Taylor did not know these boys very well. She had seen them like one weekend a year on occasion. Everything else she knows about Jeremiah and Conrad is stuff she hears from Belly. And so she's hearing about Belly constantly pining for Conrad and him not giving her the light of day, and only hearing about the negative things because you complain to your best friend. You complain to your best friend about the things that are happening to you and the things that make you sad. So she's complaining about Conrad to Taylor and telling her that he doesn't give her the light of day. And then she's only hearing the good things about Jeremiah because they're just friends. She's hearing the good things and then the sudden random romance things. And that's why Taylor is Team Jeremiah. Because she doesn't know these people for real. She's only hearing from Belly. And then Steven knows them just as well as Belly. He spends so much time with them. He loves them both. He has love for both brothers. And he's Team Conrad, openly, constantly, all the time. Not to mention Susanna being very, very Team Conrad. And that's because she's seen them interact when they were kids. She talks about all the time how Conrad's always very sweet to her. And do I think that some of Belly's whole love life issues are low-key Susanna's fault? Yes. Am I going to blame a dead woman? No. However, she's a little responsible because she put a lot of pressure on Belly to end up with one of her boys. She says that verbatim. She said, "Oh, I always knew you were destined for one of my boys." And so now Belly feels like this is what she's supposed to do. Like, this is what she's destined to do. She'll be disappointing Susanna if she doesn't. You know what I mean? And so Susanna put weird pressure on the situation. But Susanna also was talking about Conrad. She did not mean Jeremiah. It's very clear she was talking about Conrad because she never even considered that it might be Jeremiah. It was always Conrad to her. And it takes her forever to even realize that Jeremiah has a crush on Belly because it's just like not even a thought to her. Because it's always been Belly and Conrad. Okay, now I'm going to start to get into some of the differences in how Jeremiah and Conrad act and react to things. Let's start with perhaps the most obvious, when Belly and Conrad are about to kiss on the dock and Jeremiah shoots a firework at them, which is crazy. And people are always like, it almost hit them. It was so far away from them. You guys are being so dramatic. You can't control where a firework goes. He just shot it in that general direction and was like, still dangerous. And even if he didn't mean to hit them with it, still dangerous, still weird behavior. Weirdo freak behavior. I have to put this on now. I can't talk while I do it. Hang on. And I'm gonna look crazy while it's on. Bear with me. But then, when Conrad confessed his feelings to Belly the first time, he had no idea that Jeremiah and Belly had kissed. He was fully unaware that Jeremiah had any feelings for Belly whatsoever. Or when Jeremiah kissed Belly, he had fully seen Belly and Conrad almost kiss like a night before and shot a firework at them. So he was fully aware there was something going on between Belly and Conrad. And so for him to then get so mad when Belly tells him that, as if he wasn't fully aware that that was happening. Like, if Jeremiah hadn't shot the firework at them, they would have kissed in that moment, and they would have kissed before Jeremiah and Belly kissed. He then proceeds to freak out on Belly, throw his mom's cancer in his face, and say he never wants to see her again. Switch them around. When Conrad finds out that Belly and Jeremiah kissed, he offers to be the one to talk to Jeremiah. He is super calm and mature about it, and he also then agrees with Belly to put whatever they have on pause to spare Jeremiah's feelings. However, then when Jeremiah is dating Belly later on, he doesn't even attempt to spare Conrad's feelings and proceeds to parade her around in front of him with no regard for his emotions, no regard for his feelings at all. The only scene in the whole show in which Jeremiah even slightly has any regard for Conrad's feelings are outside of that hotel when he says, "She deserves to know how you feel. Tell her that you love her. If she chooses you, I'll let her go." But I don't think, first of all, I don't think that's true. I think he then would have proceeded to do what he did the first time and get snarky and weird and avoid them at all costs, which is, like, not good either. And secondly, why would he even still proceed to date Belly after that? Like, he hears Conrad is confessing for, like, the third time that he's still in love with Belly. He's fully aware, and yet he still then proceeds to date her. Very odd behavior. Why do you hate your brother? And then after hearing, literally like a day after hearing that, proceed to make out with her on top of his car. Weirdo freak. And what I was talking about before, this is way too bright, I promise it's gonna get lighter. Anyway, what I was talking about before about how he would, like, avoid them and be weird, my perfect example of this is when Jeremiah literally said, like, at Thanksgiving when Conrad and Belly are dating, at Thanksgiving, Jeremiah pulls Conrad aside and was like, "Next time she's gonna be here, tell me, because I would have skipped it." He literally says he would have skipped Thanksgiving with his dying mother because Belly and Conrad were there and they held hands one time the whole dinner. Whereas when Jeremiah and Billy are dating and they're being all over each other in front of Conrad, he says nothing and just in his voiceover is like, "I just decided I couldn't be alone with her because that would be too hard and I wouldn't be able to not tell her that I was in love with her." So he just decides not to be alone with her. Very different reactions, I fear. Another time they reacted to things very, very differently is, see how I haven't brought up the cheating thing once yet? That's because there's so much stacked against him that I didn't even need to until now, but here comes the cheating part. Well, reactions to cheating. I'm not even going to really mention the actual cheating thing yet. I'm going to get to it, though. But anyway, when Belly finds out that Jeremiah cheated on her, he basically insinuates that she has no right to be upset and that it's actually fine and nothing is wrong because they were on a break. Okay, weird. It was like 3 days, boyfriend. Not to mention, I'm going to get into why I don't think the break argument counts either, but the reaction to that, already fucking weird. Already fucking weird. He was like, "I thought we were broken up, so actually you aren't allowed to be mad." But then, at the funeral, when Conrad is having a panic attack, and Aubrey helps him out, because she's just the one who happened upon him. And she was helping him through a panic attack at his mother's funeral, and then Belly acts like a freak and ruins the funeral like a weirdo. I love Belly, don't get me wrong, I'm not one of those Belly haters, but that moment, it was hard to root for her in that moment. Anyway, so that happens, and Belly is totally in the wrong there, and it was a weird situation, and Belly did a weird thing. And then later on, when they're talking about it and she's apologizing for it, he, like, stops her from apologizing and says, and when she was like, "Oh, I had no right to get upset about you and Aubrey being together because it's not like we were even together," he stops her and goes, "You had every right. Of course you did." No, she didn't. But the fact that he's like validating her feelings and is like, "Hey, you had every right to be upset, it's fine." And then Jeremiah did something actually wrong and is like, "You have no right to be upset." Big difference. Big difference. And now, let me pause my differences and reactions to say, the reason that I don't think the on a break thing is valid is because of the bracelet. He got her a bracelet in Cabo. And if he had gotten that bracelet for her well in Cabo, then he knew they were going to get back together. And if he slept with somebody while knowing he was going to get back with Belly when he got back, then it's cheating. Then the on a break thing it's not valid. It's not a valid excuse. Also, he fully picked that fight on purpose so that he could be single for Cabo and hook up with somebody. Not to mention, he didn't tell her. That's what's the most fucked up. Like, whether you believe it was cheating or not, he didn't tell her, and that makes it bad. And apologizing for cheating by proposing is cuckoo bananas crazy. There's not one single time that Conrad gets upset and yells and cusses at Belly. He never yells at her. Not one singular time. However, every time Jeremiah gets even slightly upset, he yells and swears at her and just says the most heinous things to her. Has Conrad said some questionable stuff to her? Yeah, but he's never yelled and cussed at her. Very different reactions. The only time that Conrad is rude to Belly and Jeremiah about being together, rather than just like distant about it, is the scene in the car after he sees them making out on his car, which, that's jarring. That's upsetting to see. He was valid to be upset. They were weird for that. And then he proceeds to be just like so sarcastic and snarky to them the whole car ride. But even then, he's not yelling at them. He's not cussing at them. He's not really like saying anything directly rude. He's just saying things that are backhanded. And like, Jeremiah's crash out would have been so much worse. And you know that. And also, he was hilarious the whole time, and everything he said, did he lie? Did he lie the whole time? No. Did he make it weird and uncomfortable? Yeah, but like, they made it weird and uncomfortable by making out on his car. And then, in the newest season, it's just, they like go to show you how every character has changed, and Jeremiah just hasn't. He's still immature. He treats Belly like a parent. Why is she gentle parenting him? The way that they interact is very strange. And I think the lack of like voiceovers and inner monologue from Belly this season is intentional, and I think this is why, kind of showing how much she's lost herself in this relationship, and also because outwardly she's trying to show that she's very happy with Jeremiah, but on the inside she's feeling this internal conflict, and she's so scared that she made the wrong choice that she's trying so hard to double down on it and prove everyone that she was right and she did the right thing. And she's so scared to like admit that it's the wrong choice. So outwardly she's like, oh, I'm so happy, I love Jeremiah, we're gonna get married, I'm so glad. But then on the inside it's this internal conflict, and that's especially clear when we see her see Conrad again for the first time. And like, time stops, and we still don't really get an internal monologue or voiceover from her, which we have a ton in the other seasons. And I think that's intentional, because it's like, it would show us the contrast, and we're not supposed to see that yet. And I think that's very smart. Belly and Jeremiah got together at a time when they were both vulnerable and in an emotional place, and they latched on to each other in that moment because they needed each other in that moment. And now it's just like, he's replaced his mother with her. There are multiple times in the show where Belly refers to being with Jeremiah as easier, and again, it's because they latched onto each other in a hard time, and he was just there. They were just there for each other, and it's easier. So it's like, it's not love, it's the easy option. It's easy because it's what she picked, and it's just always been there, it's consistent, it's easy for her. We even hear Steven refer to it as the easier option, except he lists it as a con, and he says it's not good for Belly, and that she needs to be with somebody who challenges her like Conrad. But then, again, growth-wise, we see that Connie baby is in therapy, and he's doing so well. And God, can we just talk how fucking heartbreaking it is that he was talking to his therapist, and his therapist asked him to describe like the best case scenario for the day, and literally we hear Conrad talking about how his worst fear and why he doesn't want to go is because he's so terrified that it'll go wrong and go poorly and be a bad day, and all he wants is the best version of the day. And then he gets there, and the exact worst version of the day that could possibly happen happens, and he finds out that the love of his life is marrying his brother, and then they leave him standing there at the restaurant by himself after he hasn't seen them in 2 years, except for Billy at Christmas. The Christmas scene also is a good example, because every time we see her with Jeremiah, she takes on that weird parental role. She's constantly taking care of him. She's just to constantly be taking care of him and gentle parenting the boy. But then we see her at Christmas with Conrad, and she reverts back to that like childlike whimsy state, because she's able to be herself with Conrad because she doesn't have to parent him. Jeremiah not even, like, being able to read his email on time and thus having to repeat a semester and being 20K in debt. Like, yeah, taking an extra semester to graduate is a relatively normal thing, but it was very avoidable for Jeremiah if he had just been responsible. Also, I just rewatched this scene, so it's kind of fresh on my mind, but the scene at the party, again, at Cousins, is so reflective of the dynamic and the overall story. Hear me out. So Conrad and Belly have just had their little blowout argument on the beach, and we get that super painful "I thought you knew" moment, which rings in my head every day of my goddamn life. And Belly is having a little moment to herself as she's watching people trash the house, and her voiceover is talking about how she failed Susanna and lost the magic of Cousins, and she's just, like, really upset about the whole thing, obviously. And we see her drunkenly re-enter this party. And across the crowd, she spots none other than Jeremiah standing on the other side of the room. She begins to make her way through the crowd to Jeremiah, right? Right? And then, like, by divine intervention or something, without even having to fully be 100% sure he was there, she senses somebody behind her. She stops in the middle of the floor. She's looking at Jeremiah, who she was just walking towards. But behind her is Conrad. So she's walking towards Jeremiah with Conrad behind her. Going to Jeremiah, Conrad's in the past. However, she stops going to Jeremiah. She stops in the middle of the floor. You can see Jeremiah's face fall. And then she turns around and stares at Conrad. And she does not continue making her way over to Jeremiah. Now, if that wasn't obvious, let me continue to explain why I think that's indicative of the bigger story, the bigger plot. Because even though Conrad is behind her and she's making her way to Jeremiah, she cannot fully go to Jeremiah because even though he's behind her, it's always Conrad. She cannot fully be with Jeremiah because she's not over Conrad. She did not even have to turn around to know he was there. That's that invisible force they're always talking about. Even Jeremiah references, there's that invisible force pulling them together. They're inevitable. Also, at that party, can we talk about the fact that Belly and Conrad's outfits are color coordinated? Not Belly and Jeremiah's, Belly and Conrad's. There is so much more I could say, honestly. I feel like I just scratched the surface, but I've already been talking about this for over an hour now. And I'm gonna have to edit that footage down like a motherfucker. But I do talk about my thoughts and opinions as they occur to me on TikTok too, so if you want to go follow me there, I talk about it there as well. So some things that I didn't fully get into detail on here. But yeah, for Jeremiah, every single time he talks about her, it's all lust and appearance based, and then every time Conrad talks about her, it's all feeling emotion based. That's like the overall overarching reason why that was to sum it all up. Also, and the actual last thing I'll say this time, I'm not only Team Conrad because Jeremiah sucks. Like, do I love Jeremiah and all of his decisions? No. But the main reason that I'm Team Conrad is because the main theme throughout the entire show is that they're inevitable. And it's clear in all of their actions and the things they do and the way that they're magnetically drawn to each other at all times. Jeremiah could be the best boyfriend in the world and I would still be Team Conrad for those reasons. Like, I think that it has less to do with the kind of person they are and more to do with the kind of person they make her and the kind of person she is with each boy. I think she likes who she is the best when her and Conrad are good, when they're together. I don't think Billy and Jeremiah should be together because she can never fully be with just him because it's always going to be Conrad in the back of her head, and that's not fair to either of them. It's not fair to Jeremiah, and it's not fair to Billy, and it's not fair to Conrad. It's not fair to anyone involved, really. So that, regardless of whether or not Jeremiah sucks or not. Because on occasion he does, but really, that's not what it's about. Anyway, that's why I'm Team Conrad. They're going to be endgame. You can't convince me otherwise. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you all next Monday.